So with everything that's going on in the world today, there are a lot of newly self-employed people. People that have started their own businesses, especially a lot of people that are working from home. Now, this is definitely one area where I can share some tips and tricks, and I've got some expertise on that. I've been self-employed working from home for 24 years. While I've been doing that, I've raised 3 children, including 2 autistic boys. And I think I'm up to dog number 6 and 7. So in terms of being in a crowded space and trying to get your work done with constant interruptions, I highly doubt there's anybody that's had more experience than myself. So I can give you a couple of tips. Number 1, number 2, and number 3 are all the same thing. You're never done. You are never done. Now, if you previously worked a regular job, you walked in at 8, you left at 5, oh, you had to do some overtime and you had to work till 6 or 6:30 on the occasion. When you walked in the door, most of the time, kaputs, you're done. You're able to go, maybe grab a shower, grab some food, hang with the kids. Everything is out of the mind for the most part. You already knew one of the rules about working outside of the home is don't bring the work home with you. But what happens when home is the work, especially if you're doing the work, which most of us would be, online, on our laptop, on our computer, on our phone. There's really no barrier there between I'm answering emails or I'm, in my case, listing products on eBay or Amazon. There's no barriers in between that or editing video. There's no barriers between that and, okay, I'm going to take a 10-minute break, and all you do is switch from your work browser to your play browser, and now you're watching videos or you're on social media or something like that. The switches in your mind are not going to switch on and off enough like that for that to be a healthy rest. And what's going to happen is, even though you're starting to take 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there and 15 here, your brain doesn't really get any moments off, and you will start to get into some interesting deep dark places in the recesses of your mind that you didn't know existed, because you think you're taking time off but you're not really doing it. So number 1 is definitely close the laptop, turn off the phone, leave the phone at home, leave the computer, leave home. You're going to have to walk out the door. Now, this gets into the weeds sometimes. If you're home with your spouse and you're working, or your kids or your dogs, you might start to feel guilt about walking out the door without one of them because you've been working so much. And then the next thing you know, well, you just want to go take an hour, go to the gym. Somebody wants to come with you. You want to go to the river for a half hour. You feel guilty you didn't take the dogs. Whatever the case may be. That is going to be the hardest part. That is going to be the part that takes the longest to transition to, because if you've been used to working outside the home, you come home, you got kid time, dog time, spouse time, okay? Now work is at home. So now that downtime, you are physically going to have to use the laser beams in your eyes and remove yourself from the home. Now, what do I mean by the laser beams in your eyes? Well, look. At some point, a man has to become a man, you have to become a leader, and you have to become the king of the castle, and you have to become the alpha, and all those different things that people like to say. But what that basically means is you know that mode you're in. You guys recognize the mode that you're in when you're watching a football game or you're watching a hockey game, whatever sport it is, right? And for those 3 hours, everybody knows if you mess with dad, laser beams coming out of the eyes, okay? So you need to use that same vibe, okay? That, everybody can kind of tell dad's had enough. He's leaving the house for an hour, maybe even 2 hours if you're lucky enough to have that much of a break. And you're going to leave the house, and if anybody even looks at you like, can you stop at the grocery store on the way home? Laser beams, all right? Your eyes are your biggest weapon, because what's going to happen if you can't use your eyes like laser beams, you might get snarky, you might get short, you might eventually explode verbally. Okay, and then what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to rewind that. You're going to have to apologize, and then you're going to end up taking whoever, wherever they wanted to go in the first place, because now you feel bad that you unloaded on them. So you have to be able to develop some body language. Think of it like sports guys, okay? When you need a break, use that same vibe around the house where people eventually know, like, That's had enough. Okay, just here's your rod. Go and don't come back until you feel better. Okay, it's an absolute must. Now, in terms of getting bombarded when you're done with work, right? This is a little bit of a different situation, okay? Because even the drive home can be a buffer. And I've talked about this in other videos. If you're working outside of the house and then, you've got a 20-minute ride home, maybe you stop off at the river or the beach or whatever, you put the board in, you put the pool, you go to the gym, you do something so you have some transition time before you get home, and the wife and the kids and the dogs, which you're lucky to have, they all want to have time with you, but you've had you can take a breath, right? You've had a couple of thoughts to yourself where you were able to sit in the car by yourself and have like one thought, two thoughts, and have actually a third thought formulate in your brain before somebody else from the outside actually needed your attention. Now, if you're working from home, that transition time is gone, that buffer time is gone. So a couple of things. Number one, like I said, make sure you're able to exit the building appropriately before it gets to be too much. But also, you're going to have to let everybody know your scheduling, okay? Now, I know when you're self-employed, you're never done, so scheduling might be a little bit of, that's a tough word to use, but I'll give you an example for me, okay? I basically am up working, I'm up by 6:30, I'm working by 7:15, 7:30. Takes me a little bit longer to get working in the morning because I have a lot to take care of with the dogs. They're older. It's not as simple as open up the door and let them out, but that's a different story. So I'm usually working by 7:30. Now, the problem with being self-employed is you can work from 7:30 to 3:30 straight, and that's 8 hours, right? You can work those 8 hours straight. Number one, you're not done. Number two, you're not even close to done. Number three, you have 4 or 5 hours more work that you need to do, but your productivity is taking a dive. Now, if you didn't listen to the other video where I suggested you try to take a nap, maybe you're not able to take a nap, okay? Maybe you continue to get interrupted while you're taking a nap. I'm not going to mention anybody that might be able to hear me about that, but that's a completely different story. The point is that every day about 3 o'clock, I head upstairs, I get into my recliner, and I'm in my relax zone. And the reason I have to do that, especially if I haven't had a nap, is because many nights I've got hockey or I've got other work that I have to do that night. So I know starting about 6 o'clock, I've got about another 5 hours worth of work. I'm 51 years old. I'm not going to work straight from 7:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. Not for long before I fall on my ass, okay? And what happens if you try to do that? Number one, you're not even going to have the energy to exit the building properly when you need to take a break. Okay, that's the first thing that's going to happen. And number two, that patience that you have with everybody else is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. So the same technique that you're going to use with the laser beam eyes when it's time for you to leave, people need to know it's 3 o'clock. If Dad's in that chair, if you're in that chair, unless somebody's eyeballs are bleeding or something happened to the dog, he's not to be spoken to until you can visibly see him go from shaking like a madman to having been calmed down and had a little bit of downtime. So that's another thing that probably you're struggling with. I know a lot of people struggle with this, is communicating. Yes, kids, wife, dogs, yes, I'm home, but this is also where I work. So I have to monitor, I have to have it treated as though this is my workplace. And when I am ready to engage with you, I will let you know. It's tough. I realize that it is hard to draw those lines, especially if wife and kids and dogs are used to you coming home. Daddy's home 5 o'clock. Boom. I got Dad's here, right? Now that's all changed. It's all different. There's a lot of people who have to work from home now. They've started their own business because they got sick and tired of the businesses that they were in getting closed down at no account of their own. So there's a lot of things that have changed. That's the biggest advice I can give you, is that you're going to have to sit down with everybody and say, look, this is different now. Life is different. Life has changed. There's other things that have happened. There's other reasons and ways that life has changed. But this is one of the big ones. You're going to have to make sure that nobody's taking it personal, that you need your downtime, because now they're going to see your downtime. You see what I'm saying? Before, maybe you worked outside of the house, you had an hour lunch, you go sit under a tree, nobody bothered you, nobody, wife, kids didn't see the downtime. Daddy didn't exist while you were on your lunch break. Now, you're home, they see your downtime, and if your family's anything like mine, as soon as they see that you were done working, they've got plenty to share and talk and do. They are loaded for bear. And that is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can become a bad thing if you haven't illustrated the proper way to handle your boundaries, discuss the boundaries, and if all else fails, you just, there's a look. Give or take. It's something like that. That might have been more like a smaller. You get the point. Sometimes you're going to have to, I hate to put it this way, there's no politically correct way to put this. Sometimes, for your own sanity's sake, you're just going to have to be a dick.